Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. Today with Mr. Rick Horner.
How
Rick,
you doing?
well, pleasure to meet you. I ran into you at a lot of events around the Space Coast.
hmm
Rick is going to celebrate 40 years with Lockheed Martin and its whatever entities it was throughout his creation there.
hmm
And a real space person that's had his hands on the space shuttle. He's been involved in all areas of space management and safety and so forth. Rick, how are you? And welcome to Stay Curious.
Well, thank you very much. Very glad to be here. As I was getting ready for this, is just thinking about the journey I've been on in this arena, and it's actually the full clock time is almost 45 years. Started in June 6, 1979,
Mm-hmm.
for Rockwell International as a thing called a methods analyst.
Methods analyst.
And I was working for the quality assurance directorate. And as I mentioned off camera, I knew nothing about this business. I just happened to be at the place where they needed people. I needed a job. I had a non-technical undergraduate degree, and as I said, had a pulse.
Had a pulse. Well, Rick, we're going to enjoy a great conversation with you. We welcome all of our Stay Curious fans, our second program of the year here. And what's P?
It's a banner.
Oh, P's the banner. Oh, okay. Okay. There you got it there. Okay, buddy. Good. Thank you. Selvin Trotter is on our board here today. Marty Winkle's still a little bit under the weather. I talked to our good friend Marty, and Rick knows Marty, and we
Very
had
well.
Rick's wife Perry on the show about a month ago, and we'll see a picture of her here in a minute. But Rick is one of these guys I've seen at some of the events here, and we were talking before we went live, is how much I appreciate the space worker. They are a unique mentality. They have a mindset that is different than any group of people I've been around,
hmm
and that is saying a very positive thing
hmm
because you're all very safety conscious, but you're all very like Renaissance people, aware of the world and things around the world
hmm
more so than maybe some other people just focused in their job. Is that a correct assessment, Rick?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly if you're flinging things up into the ether and going to space, that has a much bigger and global, importance. I think that you have a realization of the importance of it, and so therefore you're perhaps, like I said, and the other thing is about the mission. You get oriented about the mission
Mm-hmm.
and whatever it takes, you do, even if you are not an expert. And so it definitely the realm of endeavor. It's more than a job. It's been, at least from my experience, it's a mission.
And when you're on a mission, you're focused for years on that one area that you're the expert on, right? Or
Absolutely,
involved with on there.
absolutely.
Name some of the. I'll give you his brief today. Rick is a manager. What's it? Give us your title today. Your
So
senior.
I'm a senior engineering and science manager, still working. Incidentally, everyone asks, "Well, are you still working?" So I'm still working, engineering science manager for Lockheed Martin in the space division, and really my day job revolves about worrying about 80 people across the country, software engineers, technicians, folks that work ground stations, a whole bunch of areas, and we support uh, not only government customers but the Lockheed Martin Corporation at large.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're based physically here in in the city of Cape Canaveral, and got a great team that I work with, and we continue to bring value and bring capabilities to literally change the work lives of a lot of people.
Well, that you have very young-looking Rick here for spending 45 years in the space game
Started
there.
at 10 years old.
There you go, a child prodigy, right on. What I was thinking of there is, tell us a little bit about there were two companies, great companies, Lockheed and Martin Marietta, and they've merged like so many other companies have. To the people outsiders, why does that happen? Why is this a great company?
So you had Norm Augustine on Martin Marietta and a guy named Dan Tellup that was on Lockheed. And this was in 1996 that the entity known as Lockheed Martin came into being. And I think both principals recognized that if they took the capabilities of both those enterprises, they were going to have a very superior company in this realm of endeavor. And really, that has really played out.
I looked at the website, Rick, to be prepared a little bit, and it is incredible, folks, what Lockheed Martin is involved in. Over 100 major projects are listed there and we're going to see a few of them and talk about them here with Rick,
Right.
about his career here. Really an amazing company. I don't know how many globally employees they have.
We have about 120,000 employees. Probably, I would say, with this corporate entity I work for, its most important strength is its ethical base.
Mm-hmm.
They take it very, very, very seriously, and that really keeps us out of trouble as a organization. And I tell my folks, if we ever lose our ethical base, we're toast.
Give us an example of the ethics.
So
of
the
Lockheed
ethics are
Martin.
pretty easy. It's do what's right, respect respect others, and perform with excellence.
Okay.
And
It's getting to you a little bit.
yeah,
my
it does.
friend
It
there.
does. But it's a remarkably simple but very powerful construct.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, you inject that into your day-to-day work life. And I tell people that this career is a series of inflective moments. Whether you're deciding on a software system or you're deciding on a technical step that has to be done, has to be verified, do not cut corners. Do not take the easy route. If there's something bad, speak up. So that's the culture of this entity called Lockheed Martin.
What a nice moment there. Here you have a space worker, 40 years with one company. That's super rare, of course.
Super rare.
I want to come to your retirement party, my friend.
Yeah.
Because this man's got the passion there, I can see. Davis, is it safe to say that Lockheed Martin is one of these great companies that keeps America safe?
Oh, absolutely.
They do things that we can't even imagine, I'm sure, to keep our country safe.
And we're certainly, the entity is certainly a player in world events. Many of our systems are keeping countries alive, like Ukraine, literally.
Uh-huh.
And that's on the defense side. We tackle some of certainly the world's thorniest problems. You know, they said we're going to take Orion and the human crew back to the moon in less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
No one's been there in 52, 53 years. So
Or within 5,000 miles of it, anyway.
within 5,000 miles.
But
But anyway, it's been a great ride. I've enjoyed the heck out of it.
well, sometimes fate gives us this cards, and
Yep.
it seems like you played them well. Tell us a little bit about. We got a couple of things we want to do on Stay Curious, as usual. We've got Rick here is going to tell us a little bit about not only his Lockheed Martin career, but his shuttle career, where he was involved with the early days of the shuttle.
Okay.
But we've got a birthday today, a very popular astronaut, Chris Cassidy, there. And we wish a happy 54th birthday to this Navy SEAL, Mr. Chris Cassidy, born in Salem, Massachusetts. But he grew up in York, Maine, born January 4th, 1970. See, I remember 1970 like it was yesterday. How about you?
I was still a little young.
Okay.
I was.
I got my driver's license in
I was-
1970.
I was just starting junior high school.
Well, there you go. A little younger than me. 3 flights for Cassidy, 378 days in space,
Wow.
55 hours of EVA on 10 spacewalks. He's one of the most experienced spacewalkers. That's why we're giving a shout out to Chris Cassidy today on his 54th birthday. An astronaut I'd surely like to meet, a tremendous Navy SEAL. Well, Rick, there's a little bit of brag sheet about you that you sent me. Tell us, where'd you grow up?
I grew
go to
up
school and so forth?
just north of St. Augustine, Florida, in a place called Ponte Vedra Beach, Jacksonville Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Spent almost my first 18 years there. Went to Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. Got out of school. There's a couple of things. As I mentioned, I was interested in video production and media.
And you started out a whole career, as we talked before in our conversation here. You had no inkling, like you said, that you were going to be in the space age.
Not really.
Business.
Not really. So the academic threads at the time, there was a thing. I took 3 classes on what was known as systems analysis, and it was taught by one of the FSU EE professors who were still sticking around Tallahassee after the engineering school left. But anyway, that taught me a lot about systems and system development and data flow. And actually that has been a big part of my career. And I took a little bit of computer science. And as I took a little bit of computer science, I thought at the time, man, I don't want to do this for a living. Well, I've been doing something like that for 40 years.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll tell you more about that a little bit. But went to Florida State, came to Brevard County in 1978. Shuttle started manning up in 1979. And as I mentioned, I met a gentleman by the name of Ted Carey. And he was interested in giving me an opportunity. And he said, well, Rick, how'd you like to work on the space shuttle? Because he was the director of quality assurance for Rockwell International, who built the orbiter. And Columbia, at that time, in March of '79, Columbia came to the Kennedy Space Center charitably, about 3/4 of the way built.
That is some charity there, from what I've heard
The
from you
tile
space workers.
is a disaster. The other thing is the launch processing software was not ready. It was 2 years behind schedule. It was a mess, and they were putting people on the program, and I had that opportunity to jump into that business, and quite frankly, did not know anything about that business. And started as a methods analyst, which was looking at jobs, how jobs are done. But basically, I started as a staff guy to Mr. Carey, doing whatever he wanted to do. And then one day, and this was in 1980, they were standing up both a software quality engineering function and configuration management function. And I didn't even get a vote. He came to me like the finger of God. He said, Horner, you're in software.
Okay.
And so I went from the second floor of the VAB to the mezzanine level of the VAB to the Launch Processing System Software Organization, which is a whole sphere into itself, because that included the flight software that actually steered the vehicle all the way to orbit, to full test and checkout. It was the ground, you may have heard of ground launch sequencer, the ground launch sequencer. And then all of the programs, the subsystem programs, were all developed and integrated by that organization. And as you see in some of my charts, I can tell you about the area I was in. But that's how I got into this business, and frankly, I never looked back.
And I'm sure a lot of people are glad you didn't there. We'll talk a little more about that in detail here. Wanted to mention that we had a great conversation with your wife, Perry. There she is with me on a screen grab about a month ago. And there's her name out at our Space View Park that's in the background there. And she's a configuration management lady. And I really got to understand that they could stop the shuttle in their tracks if it's not the configuration.
Not to repeat what she had to deal with, each orbiter had 1 million parts.
Uh-huh.
indentured down to the lowest level.
Wow.
And you had a whole team of people, actually a very large team, it was 60, 70 people, whose whole mission was life at the time was to review the physical work documents. And most of that was at the time, hard paper, and to match what was doing in the parts to what was supposed to be there, which was as designed, to what was in reality there, which was as built. And that's where they used a system called CVAS, Configuration Verification Accounting System, which was a hierarchical proprietary database
Uh-huh.
of a million parts per orbiter.
Yeah.
And so huge amount of effort to make that happen, and huge amount of attention to accuracy. I think she told you that she even had to, many cases, had to go like into the aft of the orbiter to find a part tag to verify the accuracy of that.
Yes, quite. Please go and review Perry, her episode there on our YouTube channel, because I learned so much about it. Uh, I mean, you could have almost identical looking parts and they work, but if it didn't
Right.
have the right serial number
All
or the
that's
right all that, it was out of configuration and need to be amended or whatever.
and
It's
that
just
was very much my waterfront also from a software standpoint, because we were worried about an LPS. We were worried about what did we load on those firing room consoles. And so that was the actual software program, which incidentally each engineering subsystems engineering folks coded. They used to think how ground operations aerospace language or GOLD. There may be a manual out there on the LPS set, but then it had to be integrated into a console and a console load, and then it had to be verified. And that had to be, and that configuration was very strictly controlled once you put that software into firing room one.
Uh-huh.
And so that there was that element. I worried about a thing called the command control subsystem, and this is an archaic term in today's world, data bank.
Okay.
And what CCMS was all of the measurement, and you may have heard of a thing called an MSID. And the MSID was tied to a transducer that was on the orbiter or on the ET or the SRB. And there were roughly 60,000 of these transducers that were pulling data off and throwing them into LPS, and actually the place called the central data buffer. And LPS, the software programs, were picking them up to see if they were out of tolerance or not. And LPS had a technology even to today is still cutting edge. That was called reactive logic. So you may have seen many cases where, we're in the count and we come down to almost T0 and something is funny looking, and LPS through ground launch sequencer shuts the orbiter down. We had, I think, the 5 of those aborts on the pad.
Mm-hmm.
That's reactive logic.
Hmm.
But that's what we dealt with in advance. We worried about that entire console set, its configuration, its authentication, and certainly, and I worried about the CCMS data bank that worked in concert with that.
Huh.
And that was what LPS was doing. Of course, they had math models that were used to verify those software programs. All that had to be is done well in advance of what we would call hardware tests, because you did test with LPS at the orbiter in the horizontal. They did it in the VAB when the vehicle went vertical, and then when you went to and you run your you may have heard the term operations maintenance instructions, or OMIs.
Uh-huh.
And launch countdown was a thing called SU7. You may have heard of SU7.
I've heard of SU7.
So SU7 is in LPS is working in concert with SU7, and that's how you count down and verify you're ready to fly and subsequently fly.
Hmm.
And LPS was all through that. So that was my waterfront for a pretty good long time.
Well, the launch process service quiz will be at 5 o'clock for everybody out there to follow that. No, I'm not making light of it. There's so much, and what gets me, Rick, is you guys were pioneering a new system that had never been done before or flown before.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you didn't, of course. The first flight, the first test flight, there was not an unmanned flight. We put John Young and Bob Crippen in this thing.
Yes,
And
brass kahunas.
quite honestly, no one really fully knew whether LPS was going to cause that orbiter to cartwheel into the yard, or you're going to have those problems. Of course, you had things with thermal protection system, but so yeah, John and Cribb
Wow.
had, let's just say, some substantial intestinal fortitude,
They did.
but also we were pathfinding that. We were pathfinding and all that. I mean, we were from an information technology, and this is the other thing I take away of looking back on this thing. I watched the march of information technology, communications, and networks from the beginning in, all the way through. And we were very primitive. I mean, we were running our LPS software, developing our software on a thing called the Honeywell DPS-8. You probably don't even know what the hell that is.
I was going to
Hey.
ask you, give us an analogy of how crude the computing power was.
Well, let's
compared
put
to
it this
today.
way. Let's put it this way. If you look at one of my graphics, which I have a desk. There's no computer terminal.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
There's no network. We went to a thing called the terminal room. We dialed the computer up on a phone with a phone modem,
Rotary phone dial.
and you just put it in, and that's how we connected with the computer to actually interact in any form. The data I dealt with on the CCMS data bank, and that's also on my graphic, is I had to worry about a thing called shuttle data tapes. And these were tapes that were actually coming from a place called SAIL in Houston, Shuttle Avionics Integration Lab.
Uh-huh.
But there was no networks between the Kennedy Space Center and the Johnson Space Flight Center.
Huh.
They had to physically transport these tapes. Now, the tapes would come in through normal mail and things like that, but particularly for STS-1, these tapes came in. I actually had to go, I'm 22 years old, roughly 22 years old, and I had to go out to what was then known as, it was going to be known as a shuttle landing facility, and the astronauts were there in their T-38s and had a cargo pod underneath their jet, unpressurized. And here's my shuttle data tape, and it was cold from the condensation.
Oh, jeez.
And I had to take that tape, QA it, and then take it physically to the second floor of the LCC and load it into LPS.
My gosh, today the internet, everything is just push the button and
That didn't exist.
microseconds later.
Did
there.
not exist. Local air networks didn't exist. Terminals barely existed. But that's how you did this.
We're talking to Rick Horner here. You're going to enjoy the rest of this conversation. As you see, he's spent 40 years with the Lockheed Martin Company. Going to talk about some of the projects he's involved with, including Orion, our new spaceship to the moon. As a space worker, like your wife, we love always an opportunity to brag about our Spaceview Park, just 3 blocks from where we're sitting, Rick. Quite unique, your shuttle monument there. There's your brother-in-law, Eric Baker, in the middle there, a test project engineer. These are space workers, folks, that gave our museum $100 to put their name up there. Quite a unique tribute to a one-of-a-kind workforce in America. There you are in the upper right-hand
Yep.
corner. And your wife, Perry, there's 3 down. Tim Gagnon and is a great friend of ours, and his artist friend, George Karts. They've done dozens of emblems and patches.
Yep.
I think Tim's got a dozen or more floating on the International Space Station right now. Janine Pape, she did a Stay Curious with us, lovely lady, very one of the managers of the test project. Of the launch process system.
She is I would typify her as a titan in the LPS.
Okay. Yes, she's
She knew everything.
She does. And she was an awesome person. Janine, we need to have you back. Great friend of our friend Marty Winkle here. What does it mean to you to go out there and see and tell people that, hey, my name's out there at this Spaceview Park, where, by the way, there's handprints of over 30 Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts
Well,
in bronze, not
certainly it's nice to have the opportunity to be remembered because the world's changing, and also a lot. I mean, if you look at the shuttle workforce, okay, I was one of the younger ones. Many of the shuttle folks are a lot older,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, a lot of them are passing. And literally, these pylons may be the only place that they are remembered.
And that's why we do it, folks. And we're very proud of it. It's a beautiful park out there, and the county and the city are keeping it very clean out there. Well, let's look at what you're talking about. Here's your first days.
Yeah.
You're talking about these charts you put together for us. So go left to
So
however you want.
to the left, there's a picture of me. I was perhaps 24, kind of living in Cocoa Beach. It was a glorious time. But you'll note, like I said, there's no information technology gear on my desk because they didn't physically exist.
Right.
But we
yes.
did this, I believe, is STS-2, and during that era, for launch, people would get dressed up. The team would
Yeah,
get
you're in a
dressed up.
suit there, and
In a suit and the whole schmear. But anyway, that was
would they? That's kind of that's something that struck me is that there's no uniforms of the space workers. In the Apollo era, they got some because they could tell other people apart. That's a big story. But just kind of jeans, t-shirt,
Well, no, you would actually. I did a lot of ties out there. I did many ties for a long time, till it became totally impractical. The the VAB where we were sitting, and is fraught with many hazards going together, and so you kept it. I mean, you recognize the environment, but you dress up at that era. But anyway, because it goes back to this idea. This was a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
This was an important thing. First 4 flights were design, development, test, evaluation. It was an experimental spacecraft. Everybody on the program thought it was really important. So anyway, you kind of gave it its respect.
So it's taxpayer money. It's not like a corporation building it either. This
It was
is
again going back to the idea of the mission.
yeah.
The idea of mission, whatever it takes. So that was me. The boxes there are the general purpose computers, the GPCs that we dealt with, 8-bit computers, which in today's world is what? What are you doing?
8-bit.
We flew, and this is a bit of a punchline though. The vehicle flew most of its program with 256K of memory.
Wow.
Think about what that is in today's terms.
A Hallmark card that sings to you has probably got
Yep.
several megabytes.
And the punchline of that discussion is we only used 138K. And that ran your primary avionics software, backup flight software. So in your mind's eye, that 9 million pound hunk of metal goes from 0 to 17,000 miles an hour, goes to orbit in 8 minutes, and it's controlled with 138K of memory.
Kilobits of memory.
So
that's unreal.
So the tape is that shuttle data tape I was telling you about, and
that you retrieved from a
I retrieved
T-38.
T-38, and that was my responsibility. And again, I was all of 23 years old. The other one is, of course, the shuttle on the pad. Also, as I mentioned, I had a job to do safety walk downs at Pad A and the mobile launch platform. And I mean, I don't know if you've been out to the pad during shuttle era, but you had to take everybody out there who's going to work there.
Was.
And so there's some pretty interesting areas, like 234-foot level. You have a catwalk about this wide that you have to take people over. So if you have any vertigo, this is not
taking me over it. No.
So I did that. Learned about all the attendant hazards that you're dealing with, but that was a big part of my job, was doing safety walk downs at the pad, inside the mobile launch platform, which is built like a ship and has low oxygen, and then VAB in particular. As I mentioned, my beat was also the firing rooms 1, 2, 3, during the shuttle era. And those consoles we were very interested and engaged with, worked with all those folks. And then the other pictures are just the orbiter and the flight deck.
Glass cockpit on that.
Yeah,
one
which
there.
incidentally, in the early days, it was not a glass cockpit. It was dials, just like old airplane dials and stuff.
Flying with 165K of memory and so forth, you're trapped by technology to always be behind the current technology.
Well, you
What was that like?
well, so you say, well, my God, why were they so stingy of technology? Now you go back to Apollo, they flew with 13K of memory, which was state of the art. Absolutely, I mean, computational memory. But you get into what type of memory we're talking about, because it has to be flight hardened, vibration, radiation, and other areas. So it's not just like, chips out of your Nintendo.
Uh-huh.
So during that period when they designed this vehicle and then manufactured this vehicle, it memory was dear, specifically hard memory was dear, and so you had to write very, very efficient code. And IBM Federal Systems had flight software, and on the mezzanine level of the VAB, these guys, this was the holy of holies at LPS. They were behind 2 locked doors to get to them.
Wow.
And they were gods. They were software gods.
Huh.
But that was the environment you dealt with. And like I said, I watched the first IBM PS1. By the way, personal computers didn't exist early in 1981, 82. So I watched the first personal computer come into the Kennedy Space Center in our area, and it had whopping 25 megabytes of storage. And we all looked at each other and said, who's going to use all that?
Oh, really?
But it didn't. But, it's just the context of the time.
How big was it? What kind
was
of
just-
space did it fit?
It was about this big.
Oh, it was okay.
Yeah. The other little story, claimed to fame on the first flight, STS-1, as a software QE. I was the software QE that verified the first mass memory load on Space Shuttle Columbia.
Hmm.
Now, what's the big deal about that?
Yeah.
That was
mass memory.
mass memory load. That was a big tape drive that they kept all their procedures on, and they flew. And so what they were looking for in terms of verification, thing called a checksum. So whatever the number was, I don't remember what the number was, had to match what the number says. But I was in firing room 1 with IBM and Rockwell and the OTC looking over my shoulder as a 23-year-old software QE. Okay, Mr. Software QE, is it right? I think so. Now, I was, like I said, I barely knew what a checksum was, unfortunately, but it was that you just did what you had to do.
Fascinating. We're enjoying Rick Horner here. Let's talk a little bit about your first days in the business there, too.
So certainly those first flights, young and crippin', and that first flight was so inflective.
People didn't know if the shuttle was going to hold together. 1981, April 12th is the first flight.
Right.
You did not have the computer simulations like you have today.
Nope.
No virtual reality goggles or anything like that. It was
So you may not remember this, but actually the first launch attempt for STS-1 was a week before. And what happened was we had a console miscompare, which basically shut down LPS. That started a 16 to 18 hour day for me.
Oh, wow.
Because we started looking through everything in the documentation. Why did this happen? And this goes back to the software gods. So there was a gentleman by the name of Charlie Floyd. Charlie Floyd was a NASA guy that was from the University of Alabama, good old boy type guy. But he did a console, what they called a console dump, and read the binary, the ones and zeros, and found why, the reason we had that console miscompare. He's going, There it is. Just think about a sheet of ones and zeros and knowing what the hell that talks about. So these guys were gods. They were technical gods.
Huh.
So we fixed that, and then we were able to fly on April 12th, 1981. The little so my career continued, and that little Macintosh on the end, we saw those things came in. I got to deal with both communications protocols, and networks were starting to come in. And so I had a request to turn this little Macintosh into a IBM 3270 terminal. You probably don't even know what this is, but this is the mainframe protocol of dealing with an IBM system. And if I mentioned the CVAS system, it was a mainframe based system, and it used the 3270 protocol, which is a proprietary protocol, if you've ever seen an IBM green screen. So I turned this little Macintosh, which was cutting edge, into an IBM 3270 terminal, which, if you was absolutely almost, I felt a little bit like Dr. Frankenstein doing that.
Really?
But we started to see information technology come in, and I was a responsible guy of putting that technology into the organization. This is now into the Lockheed era, so we're roughly sitting 1984 and beyond. Other thing I mentioned on the chart is just that Into the Black. I'm sure you perhaps are familiar with that. That is a great read.
I am not familiar with that book.
That
by
is a great
Roland,
read about that first flight.
Okay.
You may have heard the famous, when we flew STS-1, and I was, of course, I was out at the base, and we watched. I was not on duty per se, and I watched it in the lobby of the Launch Control Center. And when they first opened the payload bay doors, and if you ever saw the video, there's a whole bunch of junk and FOD coming out. But then we looked on the OMS pods on the back, and there were 3 tile on the left and 2 tile on the right that were gone. And all we had heard in that program, tile, 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 tile. If you lose a tile on the bottom, the crew is dead. So we looked at the top, and we're going, and there was a couple hundred people watching. There's this gas that came out of the crowd. If that's what the top of the spaceship looks like, what does the bottom look like?
Yeah.
And so that was Columbia's first flight, and that first verification. They were able to figure out that the tile was in good shape on the bottom, and Young and Crippen could get home.
Very bold. That the bravest human space flight of all time. I mean, I don't care what you say.
It was a, and by the way, Into the Black talks in great detail about that. It's a great read. So
I'm going to find that. No, that's something that has escaped me of all the books out there. And
yeah,
there's new ones coming out all the time. We're enjoying this conversation with Rick Horner. I threw in some pretty pictures of the shuttle. We wanted to let you know, Rick, that we really take pride here at the American Space Museum of celebrating the shuttle era. You shuttle workers have done something that no one has done before, and the great John Blaha, astronaut, I heard him talk. He thinks it'll be 100 years before another space plane like this size is built.
Probably.
Because of the management and engineering of the thing.
You know, the vehicle, you kind of context how things are today versus how this program was. These vehicles were very complex. They were, we advertised, NASA advertised that these things would fly every 2 weeks, 24 times a year.
Yeah.
The best the program did was 9 flights a year. And you think, oh, wow, that was really, that's a big deal. That was really a huge effort on the program. Again, the vehicles were complex. NASA as an entity, for whatever reason, was constantly asking to modify these vehicles, change these vehicles while they were in flow. To me, one of the great unsung, I'll say, successes, certainly of the Kennedy Space Center workforce, is that we never said no to JSC, what we used to call level 2, to any mod request that they wanted to do.
Hmm.
however the impact was in terms of people, man hours, whatever, we got it done. But each flow was not a standard flow. Each flow was a unique project. And so that change that had to be integrated in a flow, both hardware and software, because if you do something to the hardware, it ripples into the software set. And we experienced that multiple times. That we were able to accommodate that. That enterprise was able to accommodate that and did whatever it took to make these vehicles safe and ready to go.
And we talk about how these vehicles are flowed, like he says, from landing to launch with Terry White, one of your friends.
Terry was on the front lines, of course.
And he's one of the managers of the OPF in the day. And Mikey Haddad, who is an engineer in level 4, they're putting the payloads in there. We those of you that watch, stay curious, like Dave Stange, John Borelli out there. We've got Robert Laws up in Dundee, Scotland, enjoying us today. And I'll bet we've got friends all over the world, Rick, watching the show today, and you're doing a great job. We're learning so much. I wanted to throw up a couple. Any of these shuttle missions, of course, we're talking about January, has a lot of twos. It's a great month for a great beginning of shuttle achievements, despite the 2 tragedies of Columbia and Challenger launched in this month. You got 2 Mir missions, first DOD mission. We try to make people understand how important these top secret Department of Defense missions were to bringing down the Iron Curtain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, during that era, I was associated with all these flights. The DoD missions were vital to national security, vital to those things. It added a little complexity in the sense that, of course, with the DoD missions and being at a secret level, you couldn't do things in the open, which is a kind of the extreme opposite of how NASA operates. NASA does everything in the open view. So you had all those protocols that the workforce had to work through to protect the assets and things of that nature that was going on.
Yeah, speaking of open view, I took the tour 20 years ago and was looking in the Space Shuttle Processing Facility there of the workers working on Raphael and the other modules there that were going to space in there, the mobile launch things on there. A couple pretty pictures or a couple pictures here to remind you of the wonderful era there. Where's that?
That's Downey, California. Now, Downey, I visited there. That was where these vehicles were built.
I love what it says in the middle there. A spaceship
has landed on planet Earth,
and it came from
Rockwell.
And is that the shirt? Is that the jacket you brought?
I got it. That's not the jacket I bought, but I do have that jacket at home. And we were very proud of that. I mean, you look at the era at that time. It's you're very proud of these spaceships. You're very proud of the workforce that built them. And you kind of get into, well, why Rockwell? Rockwell came from North American Aviation. And North American Aviation built the X-15, which really was the first space plane.
Right.
And that's where they got the experience to do this vehicle. And like I said, the culture was a good culture. I mean, during the Rockwell era, quite honestly, we were a little surprised when Lockheed came to town and took the program over. But Lockheed adapted, which was good.
Here's a kind of unusual picture that I found. I actually found some of these pictures on your Facebook. You don't see many horizontal pictures. And our friend Dan McCune might be on that crane there. Dan's involved with our museum here as our building manager, and he was a crane operator there. Can't tell which orbiter that is.
So that's 250,000 pounds of vehicle there hanging in the. You think about what could happen.
Yeah,
you think about what could happen, and that vehicle will go from that position, and then will actually nose up and they will very gently, very surely go up way high in that VAB and drop that vehicle on the mobile launch
Yeah.
platform.
Incredible to watch videos of it on the YouTube and so forth. Of course, beautiful pictures like this. That's a white
That's
tank with
one of
a
the first
black
two.
circle on the top. That's STS-1.
Yep.
Uh,
That was a nice picture. I got that from somewhere, but anyway, yeah, it was kind of there was rotating service structure and the fixed service structure, and of
well,
course,
sad to see all that come
yeah,
down.
it's gone.
And
That was
there's
I called that the Crystal City picture
uh-huh.
with the lights at night.
Twilight.
It's kind of you be if you're I consider myself a denizen of this launch base, and you worked all shifts. Okay, I worked first, second, third, and you would see the pad gleaming in the dark, and and you're out there working this thing and going, wow, this is really cool
Yeah,
being part of it.
absolutely. That's and then to get to see a launch
Yep.
from somewhere like that. I've
I-
never seen these pictures before. I love the orange flame on the cloud tops there.
I'm not sure who the photographer
Yeah,
is.
don't sue us here. We'll give you credit if we knew who
Yeah.
you were.
Yeah.
And then this has
one.
got to be a photoshopped
Yeah, I believe it is.
with all the.
I've seen that
smoke
in
coming.
some of the, I'll call it some of the
Still,
public affairs.
Pretty
stuff.
doggone dramatic looking. There.
Well, this was a vehicle that first one, no one, and I didn't have any baseline because when this vehicle, when those solids lit, it was gone. It was going.
Yeah,
Man.
people talk about seeing the Saturn V, which I never did, but Marty Winkle, my
Mhm.
co-producer, it just was pain to
It was-
watch it rumble off, and this one just popped off.
Closest analog to that Saturn V was Delta IV Heavy, which is all liquid fueled, and it I always use the term, it's like a semi truck slowly but ever so surely flying out. What's interesting is, and we'll talk about Artemis and Orion in a bit, most of the Artemis vehicle is shuttle derived.
Yes.
The big solids and the now 4 space shuttle main engines at the bottom. And so it's a little bit of both. It moves quicker, but it's still this huge, it's bigger than a Saturn V coming off the pad.
Well, any final thoughts on the shuttle before we go to what you're doing today? With
It was a magnificent, I would have to probably say highlight of my professional life. The people, just everything about it was wonderful.
and it still lives in our International Space Station.
Yep.
And it wouldn't be possible, and that's what we're bent on here at the American Space Museum, specifically Stay Curious, is to celebrate it as much as we can, because you people are going to be around for another 20 years, hopefully,
I
to
hope
share
so,
the
yes.
stories in there.
I hope
That's,
so.
that's like, just like
There are
we
many
can-
stories. I mean, I got lots of stories. I got to write my book about this thing.
We'll have Rick back here. We're breaking the ice with him here. Maybe we'll get you and your wife together here to
Oh my goodness.
double team me up on there. Bring your barbecue that your wife brags
Yes,
about.
okay.
Okay. Well, here's what you're doing today, my friend. Here's your.
So yeah, and by the way, so when I left Shuttle, I went back to what I call the Lockheed Martin mothership, and I've had all sorts of merry adventures. I think if I counted up, I've been on 6, perhaps 7 other NASA programs. Some big, some small, some shuttle related, some not shuttle related. So here we have Orion. Orion, incidentally, started as a program in 2006.
Mhm.
I remember very vividly when this was awarded. It was 2006. So do the math. This program's been in existence
18
for
years.
almost 18 years, and it's taken us a long time to get to this point. The Orion vehicle is being physically manufactured and certainly integrated across the Kennedy Space Center and Operations Checkout Building, ONC building, which I spent a lot of my time in. It is intended for deep space travel. It's to keep a crew of 4 alive for certainly as much as a month or two. It's designed to get us to the moon. It's designed to ultimately get us to Mars. And we have the Artemis vehicle, which is putting together, and we're coming up with crew. So what my organization's doing with this is we're worried about the reuse of parts on these vehicles. So we have a thread now on the program. I would say not as similar to Shuttle, but we're trying to reuse as many of our parts as possible. But you just don't take part off one spaceship and put it on a new spaceship. It has to have a whole set of data pedigree that says you can fly it, and even to the extent of how much more life it has in it. So we're in the general, we're involved and have built the system out to allow program management to figure that out. And so that's my little slice of Orion that I'm supporting. And being an old shuttle guy, I'm very excited to be part of this.
Are there more than one vehicles?
We're Lockheed Martin is on the contract to build 9 Orions. We have currently built 4. I think we're worried about Orion 5. We got Orion 2. It is very close to being pushed out the door.
And that's the one for Artemis 2?
That's for Artemis 2. We got 3, 4, and 5 that's in flow. 3 will be the one that we do our landing attempt. So there's 5 Orions over at the Kennedy Space Center in various states of flow right now.
At the Kennedy Space Center.
That's where it's being physically built. The pressure
and the operations and checkout now the Neil Armstrong Museum building.
It's right there. If you've never had a chance to see the floor, it's
well, I have. They let us walk by the door one time when I was over there,
Yeah.
and you could peek in. But
so it's
I bet you all didn't know that 9 Orion vehicles are contracted.
well, and so but we're going to be this program, and this vehicle will be serving NASA and the nation perhaps certainly for another 20 years, if not longer.
Okay. Good. Will they be used to go to the International Space Station?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. That's going to be the mission of the Boeing Starliner.
Uh-huh.
And we wish that program well, that they get their vehicle ready to go. I mean, right now to get to station with people, right now the only vehicle the NASA has in its possession is a Crew Dragon.
True. And that's a contracted piece of spacecraft there, basically.
Well, and they've NASA as an agency has gone to a thing called Commercial Crew, and the idea is that they show up with their flight crew, and you as the contractor take care of everything, right down to the spacesuits.
Want to just clear the air for those of you that don't know. They're not landing the Orion spacecraft on the moon. That is the spaceship to go to the Gateway space station. That's the orbit between the Earth and the moon. And we're taking either the Starship or Blue Origin's LEM on steroids.
Yep,
That's
yep.
not been really...
And that programmatically appears to be...
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, they've got a lot of work to do. Let's put it that way.
But they did with the lunar module in Grumman.
They did.
And the Apollo too. I mean, but yes, there's a lot of head scratching about that 300-foot Starship landing on.
That'll be
a cratered area of the South Pole.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So we have I'd say the program to get to the moon by 2025 has a lot to do.
Yeah.
Has a lot to do, and certainly we will do our little part on it. But
while we're talking about that, what's the company line on that? That we don't care if it takes us to 2026 or 27. We're going anyway. Is that what we can believe in, or what?
I really think so. It is critically important for this nation to get to the moon. We are in a race with the Chinese.
Hear that, folks? There is a space race.
There is absolutely a space race. And it's very important for this country to win it.
And why you say that?
He who gets there first, I guess I'll say, has the opportunity to set the agenda.
The old what we've done on Earth is conquer and take over, or
Well,
or take something and it's mine and you can't have any.
well, I don't think that's going to be our country's position.
Right, but we're in China could be that way.
China could be that way. I mean, you get a whole issue of what is governance on the moon going to look like? Because if we're going to the moon, we're staying.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just doing a camping trip.
Right.
And there's a whole set of hardware
Hopefully
that's
not.
hardware that's and capability that's going to be where we have a permanent presence on the moon.
We're not sending humans to the moon. We're sending care packages of habitats and food and the life necessities to create atmosphere.
So one of the other programs outside of NASA that I've had the pleasure of working for is the United States Antarctic program.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I spent we delivered our enterprise asset management system with that. But if you look at Antarctica and what we do with the National Science Foundation, which is a amazing federal agency, it is the closest analog that we have of operating on another planet.
That doesn't surprise me. We've always thought as baby boomers we should have, bases on the moon for 20 years like Antarctica.
But how do you get into the mechanics? How do you supply that base?
Yeah.
How do you maintain that base in an absolute hostile environment? Because we have a physical, United States has a physical facility at the South Pole that is continuously inhabited.
Mm-hmm.
How do you operate in that type of environment? It's no different than if we were sitting on the moon or sitting on Mars.
And are the right people looking at that model to
certainly?
I
think so.
Okay.
But there's a lot of. But the other piece of that is how is Antarctica governed? Antarctica, no one owns Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
The treaty that is under that operation, and we got into this a little bit by working USAP, you're not supposed to even bring a rock home. That is a treaty violation.
Is that right?
Yes.
Huh.
And so, what you see in Antarctica, it's peaceful research, but no one owns it. No one is exploiting it. No one's mining. No one's doing those things.
No oil drilling.
No oil drilling. Now, we get into an interesting discussion with the moon. Why are we going there? Well, we think there's a lot of resources on the moon we can use, which means we are going to exploit it.
Yeah.
But who's going to get there first and who's going to set the agenda, I think, is a very big picture question.
Fascinating. That's a tangent we could go down to, Rick, for a little bit longer, but we're going to continue on here. He's got some swag to show us. We wanted to show you a little bit about Lockheed Martin off their Facebook page there and their Artemis. I was very impressed with all of the things that they're involved in, from the helicopters. That's in a manned combat submarine in the middle there. But you've done things that people are familiar with there. The Lucy is on its way, spacecraft's on its way to visit a bunch of asteroids around Jupiter.
Right. Just had a sample return from an asteroid called Beano.
Yep.
And we got that sample returned back and it successfully. So, this organization, the Space Division, has got some really amazing missions that they have underway. We certainly as an entity take them absolutely seriously, and we take our customers' mission as our own.
Visit their website there. Kind of impressive and very inspirational in a way of what the great things they're doing to protect our country.
Mm-hmm.
There's some the Martin Marietta Corporation, as we were talking, is distinguished for the only company to do what in interplanetary exploration.
Well, if you go back to the two heritage companies, Lockheed and Martin Marietta, if memory serves me, they did the first Viking landers, which was in 1976. I think that was a long, long time ago, and landed on the moon successfully. So we have that heritage. Lockheed has done the Agena. They've done all the Fleet Ballistic Missile Program. So it's really been a good marriage. I mean, it's certainly from '96 to now, and the organization has done well, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
Well, I can tell that. We're proud to have you talk about it here. Osiris Rex there in the middle on the bottom brought back a piece of a asteroid named Bennu. An incredible thing that we have in our hands, a piece of something that was, 100 million miles away. And
They're rewriting the textbooks as we speak with what they're finding out.
absolutely. Are they? I haven't seen
really-
too many results of Osiris Rex, but
They actually got it. They've opened the pod. It survived, of course, getting through reentry, and they're again. I did a very brief reading of it. They're finding characteristics of that asteroid that they're scratching their heads on. They don't know why it is the way it is.
just
that
like
type
the
of thing.
Webb telescope is finding galaxies that shouldn't be there 12 billion years ago.
So we're having a lot of you think about exploration and us understanding the universe. The textbooks are literally being rewritten as we speak.
kind of the more we know, the less we know, huh?
Absolutely.
In there. Well, let's see where we're going to go with this here. We wanted to show you that here in a minute. Why don't you do a little show and tell?
a couple show
As
and
we've
tell
had a
things.
really wonderful time with you, Rick. here.
So, I bring my hard hat. This was the one who's talking about this is everybody got one of these. The space shuttle, hard hat. That's a 40-year-old artifact.
Right on.
So, everyone had to have a hard hat. You never know what's going to fall on you.
Right.
This is in LPS land, we all had this jacket. And this
Uh-huh.
was not issued. I think we had to buy them. But you see, it says launch team, dirt shirts, white tank, and this is what you wandered around in the firing rooms a lot with this type of jacket. I can't even get in this damn thing now.
Screen printers made a fortune around here during the era there. There was always T-shirts being made for everyone from pad rats to the
Oh yeah,
launch
there's so
process
many
services
things like
thing.
that.
Here, let me show this. This is a really nice keepsake here. Beautiful.
So this guy came out of the study. This is recognition that he participated in STS-1. And you got John Young, Bob Crippen,
A coin that everybody
a
wants
coin
in their
that
collection there.
actually supposedly
And,
a piece of material from the orbiter. Anyway, these are things that you look back and go, my God, it's been a long time.
1981,
1981,
40. And
and so the other thing, let's see this.
did you have any things flown in space for you by an astronaut
Well, I got-
specifically? Or
Let's look at this.
all right.
So one of the projects that I did, and this is a little later on, where we were dealing with the back end systems of the of shuttle processing, and there's a thing called the Operations Requirements Specification Document and Requirements, big OMRSD. So what this was, you could do a whole show on this. The OMRSD were the requirements for all test and checkout for in this case an orbiter and the SRBs. What are the engineering things that had to be verified, had to be tested, and there's roughly 33,000 of these things that had to be on any given flow that had to be attested to from an engineering standpoint.
Just 33,000.
Only 33,000.
Okay.
So the systems that we had and what I had a team to do is actually we figured out a way to close these things in an automated manner, because before it was human beings on a piece of paper trying to figure out an initial from an engineer that had to be keyed into this OMRS system, it's called OMRS flow planning system, to close them, and then we had to do this for every flow.
Huh.
So this flew in space. You'll see Jay Honeycutt put this thing out, and I've got two of these. This is one project.
That's STS-49? or,
STS-49.
Bruce Melnick's a friend of ours. Kathy Thornton.
Yep, our Coast Guard astronaut.
Yep.
So anyway, so this was
There's your signature there in the bottom, Jay.
Yep. and that was a thing called OMRS, closed loop first increment.
Huh.
And so what we did, we used the power of we're in a mainframe arena. We're able to tell the computer if there's a certain status on the work documents that you can close the OMRS requirements.
Thereby effectively accomplishment of our mission objectives on this 49 May 92 there,
Yeah, so
1992.
1992.
So looks like old Mr. Honeycutt autographed that himself there.
Yep.
On there. That's not yeah.
I have one more, but I didn't bring it.
That's sweet.
And
That's a nice
and the-
keepsake there.
And the project was a thing called non-conformance data interface. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a thing called PRACA.
Not heard of PRACA. What's that acronym?
PRACA is an acronym: Problem Reporting and Corrective Action.
Okay.
So every problem that was detected on the processing of a orbiter flow, if you had a problem, you wrote a thing called a PRACA, and it was a manual form. But to get it into an automated system, it had to go to 3 places. And so the PRACA document and anything about this thing, before we did NCDI, actually took about 2 weeks of effort to, quote, get it into a database. We built out, again, mainframe arena, not as friendly as today's world, an integrated data model where we, created an electronic PRACA, and we shot it into PRACA, we shot it into the planning and scheduling system, we shot it into the dock tracking system. So we went from 2 weeks to 2 minutes.
Wow.
And there's millions of PRACAs, millions of these things. So that was the other one I got a flag from. So that was part of the show and tell.
Oh, well, great. Did you have anything else over
And
there?
one last thing.
All right.
So we talk about the social part of this business. And so this little certificate is, people in LPS actually came up with this. And this was, if you look at the date, it was March 1981. And it was called the KSC LPS Musketeers.
Okay.
And so the background on this is that to get a moose name, which incidentally my name is the Salty Moose, you had to go to the 3rd shift firing room 1 orbiter test conductor and tell a moose joke.
Oh, really?
And so there are hundreds, probably a couple hundred people that got this certificate, and we, it was part of the I'll call it the levity of the program. It added to a spirit of corps, and anyway, that was just one of my other artifacts that I have on this. So I've got lots of those.
Well, that's a bullwinkle-looking moose there.
So
and,
the moose is loose
had,
at KSC.
You had to be smarter than an average squirrel to get that, didn't you?
That's right. So anyway, that was sort of the last, but we had fun. I mean, it kind of the bottom line, in spite of the challenges, the long hours, the team had fun. I mean, I got personal relationships from that time that are 40 years old. So I treasure stuff like that.
A salty moose.
A salty moose.
You were called there. Rick, what a great conversation with you. We'll have to have you back to talk some more of these. I know we got a lot of good comments from our friends out there.
Okay.
Anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share with our Stay Curious viewers?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to tell a little bit about my story.
Well, I love it. Well, no, we want to have you back.
It's been
I got
fun.
I got a question that might be on the mind of some of y'all people out there. How is artificial intelligence going to play into your arena?
It's going to have a role. It has some role right now. Matter of fact, we have some aspects of artificial intelligence that we're working as it relates to part reuse of Orion.
Okay.
So you're going to see and I'm personally trying to get as smart on AI as I can, because it's going to be applied to many areas of endeavor.
Yeah, I can't believe how 3D printing it took off in less than a decade.
Oh yes.
To where that took me by surprise. Memory has gotten so cheap
Mhm.
and plentiful, of course. We all remember, drooling over a $500, 500 megabyte hard drive or something, and now terabytes is what you look for. So
Well,
I
well,
wondered about the AI from an
so
intelligent person
generative
like
AI,
you.
and again, I know about Liz about much, is the I guess I'll call it a game changer, is the ability of these software systems to access huge data sets about stuff, and then using basically statistical and matching algorithms to come up with a result.
Uh-huh.
And do it in a conversational manner.
Okay.
So we're just getting into this era. I certainly see AI being an advisory service, both for launch operations, but also for crew on board. Hey, how do we solve this problem? What should we do? So it's a little Star Trekian. What do we do? But but we have that capability. Those capabilities are coming very fast and very furious right now.
Fascinating. Furious is the word with artificial intelligence and so many things on the front. Rick, again, thank you so much. What a great conversation. You become our favorite musketeer. All right. So, and we wanted to let everybody know that tomorrow we're going to have these two characters on the show. Let me go back there. There we go. We're going to have Carlton Bailey and Mark Usiak, our space photojournalists. We're going to talk about the space stories of 2023. I was on vacation all last week and we didn't have time to recap the wonderful world of 2023 and these rocket launches, these noisy rockets waking up all our dogs and kids in the middle of the night.
So, I'll comment briefly on this. The cadence, being an old shuttle guy, the cadence of the launches that we're seeing. And so we got to, I think by the end of 2023, we got to almost 75
Yeah.
launches, one after another. And reusability is the corner of the realm, certainly seeing that. It's changing the whole profile of what it takes to get to orbit. And, I am surprised how many people want to fly something, but it's going to get this species off this rock to another planet. Absolutely.
It definitely is. The cadence is unbelievable. SpaceX wants to launch one every 2 or 3 days between the coasts. That's 144
Yep.
in 2024. By golly, they may do it. And of course, then you got that Starship looming on the Texas coast there that needs to be
coming
proven.
here soon, apparently.
Yeah. Apparently, they're building everything for that. So, well, thanks, Rick. Tomorrow we got, like I said, Carlton and Mark Usiak both contribute to our enterprise here mightily. Monday, the one and only astronaut wrangler Nick Thomas is going to talk a little bit about the Apollo 1 fire as we get into the honoring our fallen heroes on that. So these in the month of January. So Rick, thanks again, buddy. Appreciate
My
everything.
pleasure. Thanks
so
so
glad
much.
you finally made it here. Selvin, anything to button up over there on our Streamlabs program today? Well, good job by you, Selvin, today. And until tomorrow, I'll just say that I'm Mark Marquette, and we can't wait to see you with the boys to bridge the space between us. That's Rick. Awesome show.